Hello, folks, and thank you for tuning in. I'm Casey Schulberg, the Collier County Waterkeeper, and your host for these daily live Waterkeeper briefings, coming to you straight from the COP26 Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, Scotland. My co-hosts for this evening, as for several of our shows so far, are my friend and colleague, the Kissimmee Waterkeeper, Dr. John Capece, and my friend, Chris Wilkie, Global Advocacy Manager for the Waterkeeper Alliance. We have a busy show, so let's get started. This is our 7th program from the conference, so we have passed the halfway point. Again, we split into teams today. John attended the conference while Chris took part in the protest. So John, do you want to grace us with your takeaways from your attendance at the conference today?
Hi, Casey. Well, I'm upstairs here at the exhibit of the UNFCCC, and that's the organization, subordinate organization within the United Nations that handles this climate change conference, and it stands for United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And convention doesn't refer to this conference, but rather the agreements. I came in, it was rather easy to get in today. The rain, it was, I think it kept people away, plus it's Saturday, so there was much smaller crowds here today. But I was extremely busy, excellent content here. I first went to get coffee. I always go over to the Australia pavilion. They provide some excellent free coffee. And I was sitting there, and then a fellow named Tom walked up and started telling someone else about the Australian program on soil carbon sequestration, or what's commonly called carbon farming. So I went over there and had a discussion with him at his posters within the exhibit, within the pavilion. And it was very interesting. He told me about a ranch within Australia where they are in fact selling carbon credits. And carbon sequestration into the soil is very important. We had a conference at the University of Florida this past Sunday, hosted by the University of Florida Agricultural Economics Club, and speaking was the Florida Commissioner of Agriculture. And one of the things she talked about was an effort for them to establish a carbon farming program where farmers can derive income by moving carbon from the atmosphere into permanent storage in the soil, or relatively permanent. And she was introduced by the University of Florida Vice President responsible for the land grant program, the agricultural program at the University of Florida, which includes the university, all 67 extension offices, and 20-odd research stations. And he emphasized the soil carbon issue as the greatest opportunity for agriculture to reverse, in effect, the carbon damage they've done over not just recent decades, but hundreds of years. The process of human cultivation of the soil tends to release carbon that is stored in the soil, the organic matter, back up into the atmosphere. So universities, the agricultural profession in general recognizes this as an opportunity to how they can address the climate change issue, in addition to reducing animal agriculture emissions of various greenhouse gases. So we had an excellent conversation. It was interesting to see that they were actually selling carbon credits from soil sequestration. This is very unusual, probably only a handful of programs in the whole world that's doing this. So I expect to spend additional time with those faculty members and specialists in the Australia exhibit. Now, it's important to waterkeepers that agriculture and forestry and other land management practices focus on carbon sequestration, because our concerns to a large extent involve the pollution that occurs from the landscape into our water bodies, nitrogen and phosphorus. And when you capture the carbon and sequester it into the soil, by and large, you're going to also capture significant quantities of nitrogen and phosphorus, or you're at least going to do a better job of managing those releases into the waterways. So if we can get farmers to focus on carbon farming, carbon sequestration, they will automatically address a lot of our priorities dealing with nitrogen and phosphorus. So that was an important discussion. And from there, I went over to the water pavilion and spent several hours listening to various presentations and talking with people there. One of the interesting presentations was about the water and wastewater industries globally. It is said that 3 to 7% of all anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions derive from water supply and wastewater treatment. And within that, nitrous oxide is a particularly problematic greenhouse gas. And it has 300 times the global warming effect of carbon dioxide. And to a certain extent, that's due to its long persistence within the atmosphere on the order of over 100 years. I think the number quoted was 114 years. Whereas methane, which is a serious problem, persists only for dioxide, persists in the atmosphere anywhere from 20 years to 200 years until it is dissolved into our oceans. So there was a lot of discussion of nitrous oxide and its sources. And 40% of all the nitrous oxide in the atmosphere is derived from human activities. And 75% of the human component of that comes from animal agriculture. And the dominant portion of the remainder is from this water and wastewater sector. And it accounts for, nitrous oxide accounts for 50% of the total greenhouse gas impacts from the wastewater industry. So it's very important for the water and wastewater industry to work on reducing their carbon footprint, and nitrous oxide is going to be a significant element in that. And there was a professor talking about various options, fairly complex, some achievable, some not achievable. And one of the discussion points was not only on centralized wastewater facilities, as we're accustomed to in the United States and other developed countries, but the rural, underdeveloped communities that have very localized backyard, in effect, wastewater treatment systems, as well as water supply. So a lot of discussion centered around how those efforts, those programs, often called WASH, or water and sanitation and hygiene programs of the United Nations, could help address some of those issues. But before I turn it back over to you, Casey, I'd like to just show you where I'm at here in the UNFCCC pavilion. As you can see, we've got Google well represented here, and then Bloomberg has some sort of small kiosk. But this is the second floor, and it's adjacent to the Columbia Pavilion. And then here we have the German Pavilion. And then down at the end, we have the US Action Center. And the US Action Center was, until this year, the only United States representation over the past several years at the COP, at the COP gatherings. Now we have both the Action Center and the US Center that has been organized by the administration, with all of the various agencies participating. So the United States has a much larger presence, along with all of these other nations that have been here consistently for years. What was interesting was the water pavilion. This is the first time they've had a water pavilion at the COP. So they were very excited, and perhaps another day I'll include some more information about that and a briefing from the UNICEF representative that was managing that. So, Casey, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, carbon farming sounds intriguing. Maybe we can get some of our Florida farmers to adopt that. And the reuse water is a whole issue. You know, we find that in Southwest Florida. The reused water is full of nutrients, and then they put it on golf courses, and then they refertilize it. So we need to you know, kind of rein that in. Thanks a lot. That's a interesting report from inside. So meanwhile, outside, yesterday and today were characterized by massive protests and marches attended by tens of thousands. We brought some of that footage yesterday. Today's protests took place not just in Glasgow, but in 100 towns and cities across the UK and in 100 nations around the world. So there's an interesting dichotomy kind of unfolding at the COP. It has to do with inside and outside. The protesters are saying that this is the most locked down, locked out COP ever. The students feel just shut out and they're not happy. Greta Thunberg has already declared that the summit is a failure. More status quo, more greenwashing. And another divide that I was hearing on the street is the North-South divide. So the protesters accuse the Northern Hemisphere countries of being the biggest polluters and the Southern Hemisphere countries as those who are experiencing the most suffering. So again, the question of loss and damage keeps coming up. The developed countries need to step up and offset the damage caused by climate change for underdeveloped nations, and they're going to have to foot the bill. Michael, we have a little coverage of the protest today, so we'd like to share that. That was a little bit of footage of today's activities. So you can see a real robust crowd out in the streets, a lot of energy, probably why John was able to get his coffee with no problem this morning, because I have a feeling it drained people out of the conference as well. And Chris, we were talking to you periodically during the day. You were out there with that group, with the marchers. We're gonna roll a little clip that you actually filmed and some photographs you took. So we're gonna roll that, and then we'd really like to hear your thoughts of how it felt to be in that crowd today. So we can roll the other tape, Michael.
Which could be readdressed in other places, leaving water and rivers for those uses where it's most essential. First of all, for environmental services. So basically the short answer is this, and of course I'm aware of a handful of relatively decent projects that exist, but you know, en masse they do not replicate normally. What is being replicated is unfortunately destructive. So there are hopes for the kinetic machines within the stream, but there is expectation that their production wouldn't be that big, at least initially, and more likely they will take on in the not tidal, but in the wave action mode. You know, you can call hydropower many different things. buoy system. And so I believe that further extraction, the energy of water, should switch from flowing rivers to some more abandoned but dissipated energy. But it's not my field, you know. And I know that right now we don't have this technology ready, so we cannot market it as a solution that we should use now.
So there we are with Chris out on the streets today. So Chris, how did that feel? I know you're working a lot with the Undam movement. Tell us about that and who that gentleman is that we heard from a little bit.
Well, your video editing is making my random clips stitched together well, almost as if I planned something out. So thank you for that. It was another very energizing day. I got up this morning. I planned to go to the COP for the first time, for the first part of the day, and just go to the rally at the end and skip the march, because I marched that same route yesterday. But as it turned out, I was on the screen a lot this morning communicating with people, and we had people arriving by train, a waterkeeper that showed up last night, Roberta Benefiel from Labrador, who was part of our Undam movement. So I ended up coordinating with them, and I walked the march route twice. I met folks at the train station, and we walked up to the beginning of the march. We thought we'd intercept it, but it hadn't gotten going yet, and I marched all the way back down again. So I've actually marched it 3 times. We did pull out before the rally, but it was another very energizing day. My legs should be sore, but I'm not. I'm fired up. It's really something to be out there with. I don't know if it was 100,000 people or not, but it sure felt like it. I've been to some big games at stadiums, and this felt a lot bigger. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time the back of the march got going, the front of the march was almost to the destination. Once again, people are expressing their views, their impatience, their frustration with a system that doesn't represent them and doesn't reward them, and only leads to planetary pollution and economic strife for so many people. So the inside outside is really, I think, the biggest problem I could put on this conference. There ought to be a way, there ought to be a portal to get conversations going between what was being said out on the street and what's being discussed inside the COP. There ought to be a liaison. There ought to be a way to connect folks. And unfortunately, with the pandemic and all of the safety protocols that they are doing, which I think they're doing a great job of. We have to take daily COVID tests, and a number of things. And so that would not lend itself to that, but the impact is still the same, that people out on the street don't have access to what's going on. Virtual meetings are just not the same. So yeah, I think that's it once again. But as the week goes on and into next week, our Rivers for Climate Coalition, the undam.org movement is growing in strength. We added 2 new people, Roberta from Labrador and Fiona from Manitoba. And next week we have people arriving from Bolivia and Chile. And one of the people that came here with us, Paul Wilson, was able to take part in a closed door meeting with Indigenous people and the United Nations, one of the first ever. So there are some conversations that are happening that are very interesting. We are hoping to pick up more signatures on our petition. So go to undam.org and sign the petition, please. We don't want to see we don't want to see climate credits and climate finance funding going to build more hydropower dams. And for a number of reasons, they destroy river ecosystems, they destroy river-dependent communities, and the reservoirs themselves emit methane into the atmosphere, which, as we already discussed, is a potent greenhouse gas. At the end of our part of the march, we pulled off to the side and had our banner up against a stone wall, and a woman came up. We were taking a few final photos, and a woman came up to us and started asking about this. And I spoke to her initially, and I kind of said what I just said to you. Then I thought I'd turn it over to Eugene, which was the guy talking at the end. Eugene Simonov is a member of our Rivers for Climate Coalition, and his organization is called Rivers Without Boundaries. And he has, you go toe to toe in a debate with Eugene, you're going to have your A game on, because he knows this stuff up and down. And I pulled out my phone. I was going to ask the woman, could I film? And she thought about it for a second, and she said no. She was a little embarrassed. It turned out she was a hydropower engineer. And so she must be here on some contingent to market sustainable hydropower, I would imagine. We had a lengthy debate right there on the streets of Glasgow. It lasted 20 minutes or so. Myself and Eugene and Roberta and Bonnie from International Rivers was there. And this woman, she was very nice and very knowledgeable and somewhat brave to take on 4 or 5 environmentalists in the streets. And she emphasized how glad she was to see us there, and how she shared many of our views on the protection of nature, and thought our message was really important. But she's an engineer, and engineers believe they can engineer things to find solutions. And clearly she was of that mindset, and she was she felt good about the fact that she was working on alternative to fossil fuels for energy generation. But as Eugene pointed out at the very end, there was a very important part. I was glad you included that. And is that what we see in the discussion rooms and in the marketing, and what some would say greenwashing, is the new hydropower, the sustainable hydropowers, like they like to brand it. We would still take issue with that. But they're admitting the failures of the past, but they're trying to show the way forward. And that's great. But if you look at the projects that are being completed every year, they're still in the old model. They don't have this sustainable version built out at scale. And if you look at where the dams being proposed around the world these days, it's in the global south. It's in areas where they are going to be releasing a lot of methane. And it's in countries that did not get us to this place of a climate crisis. These were not the people that will be paying the price, having their watersheds inundated, are not the folks that created this problem. So there's a justice and an equity issue there. But that was the sum total of it. And we exchanged contact information with this woman. Like I said, it's a very respectful conversation, and we hope to follow up and keep that conversation going. And who knows, maybe she'll be an advocate from the inside for us someday. But anyway, I understand that you've got another interview to play from one of our waterkeepers.
Yeah, we do, Chris, and actually it dovetails perfectly with this discussion, because it's someone that you know well, Megh Ale, who is the Nepal waterkeeper. He now supervises all 12 waterkeepers in Nepal, and his chief mission is to keep the Karnali River free flowing, to keep it from being dammed. And he's been waging a battle on this front for years. And so far he's had success, but it's not a guaranteed deal. There's no assurance that he will ultimately prevail. He and his coalition will prevail. But yes, they're talking about the Karnali River, and and how they're trying to keep it from being dammed in the coming years. So we can hear from Megh, and then we'll come back and reconvene. So it's our great pleasure to have with us today Megh Ale, who's known as the Riverman in Nepal. And he is the founder of the Nepal River Conservation Trust back in 1995. And he is also the supervisor of all waterkeepers in Nepal, of which there are now 12. And he is the Karnali River Waterkeeper. So Megh, tell us just a little bit about your mission and what you're doing to preserve the last free-flowing river in Nepal.
Right. Namaste. This is how we greet in our country. So namaste to everybody. And so when we talk about rivers of Nepal, so in the size of the country, if you look at the area, it's not that big. But in terms of what river we have, so we have very much, out of 10 highest mountain peaks, we have 8 of those, so over 8,000 meters. So all those water towers, Himalayas, the third pole. So we have majority of those. Just so you can imagine how many rivers it drains. This Himalayas creates. So, and we have 6,000 rivers and rivulets in our country. And unfortunately, each and every rivers are threatened to be dammed one way or another. So in this country, when we talk about the river, so whether it's a sewer carrier, or gravel and sand mining, or just hydro energy. When they look at the river, they look at the hydro dollars. So this is very unfortunate, the way the politicians and policymakers look at our rivers. So that's very unfortunate. The Karnali is the longest and the last free-flowing river, as well as the most pristine river we have in this country. So we're looking at, since we have so many rivers and rivulets, why not we have one river, Karnali, as a gift to our living earth, as a gift to our future generation. So, and Karnali is very special. So this goes through 3 countries. So it origins from Kailash watershed, the holy Mount Kailash watershed in Tibet, China, and then passes through Nepal, and then all the way to India. So, the total distance length of this river is 1,080 kilometers. So, and this river, if you look at the religious point of view, the holy Mount Kailash is the faith of Hindus, Buddhists, Sikh, Jain, and many other religions as well. So, and so also it goes to the Ganges, the holy Ganga, holy Ganges in India. So this is the only river actually from Kailash which touches the Ganges. So in Tibetan, the Karnali is known as the Mapcha Khabab, so which means the peacock's mouth, that oozes out from the peacock's mouth, that Karnali. In the east, the Brahmaputra, they call it, comes from the horse's mouth. And in the north, Indus, that comes from the lion's mouth. And the Shatlas in the west, it comes from the elephant's mouth. So this, from the Kailash, that's the center of, the earth. So the 4 rivers oozes out, and, it's from the, those are the sources. So the Karnali, we did the first scientific expedition on that river. We're the first one to reach to the shores and going all the way to the where Karnali finishes, to the Ganges. So there was 1,080 kilometers, and it took 44 days for us. Many places we trekked and kayak, rafted, drove around, and so finally we reached to the Ganges. So we had 11 scientists with us from universities, from Ishimode, and so on. And also, of course, the Waterkeepers. So myself, Mosam, and Ramesh, he's another Waterkeeper in Nepal. So we had a big team. So of course, we had the journalist and videographer. So it was very much well received. We got the document. We can share that. What we found, as I said, in terms of religion, as I said, the sacred river. We call the Karnali the sacred river corridor. In terms of civilization, you're talking about the Tibet civilization. Actually, the Nepali language, so known as the origins from Khas community. So they are from, and their origin is along on this river as well. Then we have Rajis and Rautis. Rautis, they are the last nomadic people, the Muggers, the Tharus, as well as Sonas, who do the gold panning. And Rajis are the fishermen tribe, and Maji also. So they all live on the bank of this river. So you could see how rich this river is. And as I said, this river corridor, and in terms of geology, I mean, it connects the Tibet Plateau, the Himalayas, the Mahabharat Range, the Chure Hills, as well as Gangetic Plain as it merges to the Ganga, all the way up. It comes all the way to the Chure Hills. So, in terms of, the wildlife, incredible. So you're talking about, so if you look at the snow leopard to Royal Bengal tiger or one-horned rhinoceros, the wall elephant. So in this corridor, you could see. So you're talking about more than 900 different species of bird life. And if you're talking about aquatic biodiversity, so it's got, freshwater dolphin to gharial crocodile, the marsher, and also varieties of fish. So 120 different species of fish have been recorded on this in this river. And the marsher, especially, that's I would say we could consider marsher as the tiger in the jungle. Mm-hmm. So if we conserve the tiger, the other wildlife will be conserved. If we conserve the marsher, so the other aquatic biodiversity will be conserved. Mm-hmm. Because marsher is the fish, so which is the predator, and it goes all the way down to the Ganges, to the lowland. So and it travels all the way up for spawning. So if we build a dam on the middle, so the marsher species will disappear. Not only marsher, the other different aquatic biodiversity will be very much affected. So also in terms of tourism. So looking at this beautiful river corridor, just walking along it is amazing. So and very pristine, very rich biodiversity, very rich cultural heritages. So along this river, in terms of whitewater rafting or kayaking, it's among the best 5 rivers in the world. So there's a lot of documentary on this river been made by many big expedition leaders. So kayakers and rafters, and this is pretty amazing. Yeah. So they have really praised this river.
I mean, I can imagine it's pretty good rafting because you're going from a fairly high elevation down to the Ganges. So that's got to provide some pretty extraordinary rafting and kayaking opportunities.
Yeah, very very big gradient. Yeah. If you look at upstream. So and yeah. So
I understand, Megh, that there's a license to build this dam, and if it comes online, it will be one of the tallest dams in the world. But the license has been accorded. Actually, you said the license was accorded for the dam. There was a delay, and now they're reapplying for a license. So just want to hear a bit about that and your efforts to hold that off, and also hear about your dream for one day having a Karnali park that would not only protect the river itself, but some of the land to each side of the river and create a whole park to preserve the Karnali. So interested to hear about that.
So, and this dam, which we're against, but there are other dams been already carrying forward as well. So this is this river is seriously under threat, and there's another dam called the Betan Karnali below. So if that gets built again, instead of one, there will be two, and if that comes in, then the further damage will be done, because the Upper Karnali Dam is above the Seti confluence, where the Seti, West Seti, and Karnali meets. So another river known as Seti, that's also the territory of Masher. So this this will be gone. So totally, this river will be destroyed. And what we have proposed after this expedition, we came up with the documentary as well as document. So why not this river to be a World Heritage Site? Why not rivers' right to be protected along it? So we sort of map that river with our geologists, with GPS and all of those in that report. So we have put that. So either side of the river, 5 kilometers. So 5 kilometers on the river left and 5 kilometers on the river right. That means there will be 10 kilometers of stretch right from the Tibet border all the way to the Bardia National Park. So that river corridor to be considered as sacred river corridor, and that area to be protected and declared as a World Heritage Site. So because as I explained, religiously, by looking at this the civilization along this river, looking at the biodiversity, the geology, and the potential of tourism, so it's huge. So just you could imagine, if the man-made Great Wall can draw over 10 million tourists a year, so just imagine, if this Karnali River is preserved, this will be a living library for people who would like to study the culture, the civilization, the nature along it. So this will be such a shame to kill this river. And Nepal already have a surplus of energy, and actually suffering. We haven't been able to sell the energy. So, and in India, so the Indian government's interest is about water more than energy, and since India is already developing the nuclear energy, so and they're also working on the solar energy, the wind energy, all of those. So, and of course, Nepal needs energy, but we already have the surplus because of the not having enough transmission line to reach to a lot of the rural areas. But Nepal won't need more than 3,000 megawatt for another 5 years, for example. In 20 years, maybe Nepal needs 10,000 megawatt. So, but we don't need like 60,000 megawatt. So at the cost of the environment, so the effect of the climate change and global warming, how it's going to affect with those big dams they're talking about in many different places. So this is very scary, and we are very much affected with the climate change. Probably you may heard very recently we had big sort of landslides, floods. In this monsoon, very unusual. So many people suffered due to that.
Do you think those landslides and floods were from the glaciers melting? What do you think is the cause of that? Or the mountains of the Himalayas melting? What do you think might have caused the flooding and landslides?
No, this is certainly glaciers are melting year by year. So the proof is there. So it's been very much proven. And obviously it did cause that. Part and partially. But very unusual rain we are facing. You know, say for example, this is autumn. So so in autumn, normally there's no rain, blue sky, but you know, in October we had you know, very bad weather, and this is harvesting time for the rice. All this rice field got flooded. All this you know, all this village got swept away in the West Nepal, also in East Nepal. So actually, you know, we lost you know, probably 1/3 of the harvest of our rice. You know, rice. You know, in this country. And similarly, we had very early rain. So, and it was very unusual. So obviously, sand and gravel mining has affected as well. So, but it, you know, it just got slided, you know. So in East Nepal, I mean, like in Bagmati province, so known as this landslide known as Melamche, you know, the Melamche small town, the whole town got swept away very early monsoon. And here we had just very late monsoon. It wasn't even monsoon. It was just rain, and you know, just destroyed the whole you know, rice harvest. So this is very unusual, very unusual. It never happened before.
I mean, we're seeing major changes in weather patterns and extreme precipitation events all over the world, wildfires, droughts. These are just the early symptoms of the climate crisis that we're already engaged in, and it's affecting everybody around the world. And we also have been talking quite a bit this week about the inequity. Certain countries have not been responsible for creating gas, you know, carbon emissions, and yet they're suffering just as much or more than the developed countries. And so there needs to be some discussion about loss and damage for your nation, your community, and it has to really be the burden of that has to be shouldered by the more developed nations that were really responsible for bringing on this issue. So we've been talking about that, the inequities of the climate crisis. And I know I was talking to Sharif Jamil, and there's been a lot of migration in Bangladesh from the coastal areas to the cities, and this has been basically prompted by climate change. So we're seeing worldwide weather patterns changing and migration being caused by climate change and suffering on a worldwide scale. Much of it in the underdeveloped nations, and so we need to address that, and the developed nations need to step up and repair some of that to try to provide compensation for the countries that may have suffered more. So that's a great discussion, Megh. That's so interesting to hear of this magnificent historic free-flowing river, 1,000 miles long, traveling through 3 countries with all the culture and lore around it. And we now know why they know you as the Riverman in Nepal. It's really amazing work that you're doing. We believe very strongly that rivers should not be dammed, and to the extent possible, we should move away from hydropower and into renewable energies, because hydropower actually has a pretty negative carbon footprint, not to mention all the concrete that is used to build those dams, and they're sort of archaic sources of energy, and there are others that are less damaging to the environment. So we're totally with you on that score. Is there anything we can do to help you with your efforts, Megh? How can we let the word out? Is there any links that you want to provide, or any petitions you want to have signed, or any work that we can do to help you, you know, with this cause and help you build the World Heritage Site one day?
No, definitely, you know, we need to spread the words to more and more people, and people need to visit this river, you know, so, and look at with their own eyes, so how beautiful this river is. So visiting that area means, you know, generating more economy to the locals, you know, the river communities. So, and obviously we are running the petition, so we'll share that petition to everyone. If you know, we look at, if you look at www.nrct.org.np, so that's our official website, and also you'll get the link for on the petition. So we need the help. So how we could fight against this dam. So obviously we need more resources. So we're looking at organizing more campaigns along this river, working with these river communities, working with more kind of a sustainable development. So how we could lift the livelihood of these people along this river, and again how we could use the renewable energy like solar and wind is a possibility there. So any help would be a big help to protect this river, to conserve this river.
Oh.
And morally, financially, or just visiting there, any help.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, Waterkeeper Alliance is helping us to work with the lawyers and to go to the court, and we really appreciate that effort. And we're working on how we could.
You're working closely with Chris Wilkie, right, on this?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And we're working on, just giving a voice. Let's save this river is not good enough. So we're working on more sustainable development. We're hoping to develop a center, so center for ecotourism. Mm-hmm. So where the people along this river communities would learn about ecotourism, adventure tourism, and also their product, we can get that to the market. So in nearby cities or to Kathmandu or even to abroad. So because the Karnali is an organic state, by the way. So when people visit there, they eat organic food. So we want to promote that. And so the local community is sustainable. So we are working on those sustainable development. So the way forward would be a center for ecotourism where we can educate, people can come and learn, from there. So the visitors can learn, the local community can learn. So then that will help to conserve this river.
Well, it's been really wonderful to hear about this magical, historic, and even this sacred river, and all the work you're doing to preserve it. So we salute you, we celebrate your work, and we will include links to the petition. We'll try to run those on the interview so that people can participate. And we're really, really grateful for your taking the time to share your thoughts and work, and more your efforts to keep the river flowing and the planet on a better track. Thank you so much, Megh. We really look forward to working with you some more.
Thank you very much, Casey. Yeah, thank you very much, Casey, for giving me this opportunity to express our thoughts about our most beautiful Himalayan river here. So let's work together. Let's join hands. Let's rally for Karnali, to save the Karnali.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megh. Thank you. Yeah. So there you have one of our fine waterkeepers around the world. Part of what we're doing this week, these 2 weeks, is highlighting various waterkeepers in different parts of the world. So Megh is doing an amazing job shepherding the Karnali and keeping it free flowing. I misspoke. I said it was 1,000 miles long. It's 1,000 kilometers long, actually 1,080. So I just want to make sure we have that right. Chris, you've been working with Megh for a while. You want to comment on the work that he's doing and how you're helping him?
Well, it was interesting listening to him. He definitely is a great ambassador for free-flowing rivers in Nepal, and quite an inspiration for so many. But I guess the thing that I think is maybe more is interesting with the way he's approaching this, that you don't always see, is that he is also looking to find a sustainable development solution for the community there. because it is not a wealthy area of Nepal. It's very remote in the west, and it takes quite an ordeal just to get there. And they are looking for any sort of economic solution so that they can improve their quality of life there. And he wants to be part of that. So he wants to set up this ecotourism center to train local youth on river skills so they can someday become guides and build it as a destination in Nepal. When people visit Nepal, everyone wants to go to Mount Everest. And that road is so heavily traveled. And even if you climb the mountain, you see trash, I understand. The government of Nepal wants to diversify the tourism. They want it to benefit more of their country. They want it to be more of a whole of Nepal approach. And just because that mountain, Mount Everest, which is a very impressive thing, it's a few meters higher than some of the other mountains around there. And this one, Mount Kailash, it happens to be in Tibet in Chinese control, but it is home to 4 of the great rivers of the world. So there are plenty of things to see in Nepal, and so Megh is actually looking to make friends in that community and to find solutions for the organic farming and for local energy generation. And I think quite notably, what we need to understand is this Upper Karnali hydropower project, as it's currently proposed, would actually dewater 50 kilometers of the river, at least for 8 months of the year. I mean, you talk about the wrong way to build a dam, that would be it, where 50 kilometers, over 30 miles, the river kind of ceases to exist for part of the year is unbelievable. And the reason why they are doing this is the river comes down and it makes this giant turn like this. It's a giant horseshoe bend that in total is 50 kilometers. And they want to drill a hole through the mountain right there and run the water through a tunnel and take advantage of that drop there. And so all this section over here would be dry. Of course, there's no opportunity there for fish migration. There's no continuity for sediment flow. So one of the things I'm learning is how important that, especially a glacial river, that sediment that flows downriver, eventually it creates habitat, it creates the fertile plains, even going out to the ocean. It is a way of mitigating climate change because it safely moves carbon out to the sea. That would all be stopped up by the dam. And by the way, those dams on rivers that have a high amount of glacial sediment, they don't last that long because the sediment piles up behind the dam and they have to redo the dam or some point or dredge it out. And so it becomes a problem there. But in any event, he really wants to be part of the solution. So I think that's very interesting. He doesn't want to just say no. But what you also have to understand is this power that would be built at this dam, 600, 800 megawatts, I forget what it is, but not massive amount of power. It's not for the local community. They're actually talking, it's not even for Nepal. They would be shipping it hundreds of miles to the east to Bangladesh, enduring massive losses over that long transmission line. There's other hydropower sources in the area that Bangladesh could be tapping into. So as we understand right now, they're at a moment in their financing where their license has officially expired, and this is making the bankers nervous. And so it's possible this project may not go through. We just heard that from Megh, and that's really positive. But there is another proposal in its infancy, which is even larger, that's further downstream. And then Megh has all too much experience with this. He's witnessed so many of these rivers becoming dammed. He has a borderlands resort up by the Chinese border on the Sunkosi River. where he operates rafting, guiding, and things like that. And it's like 6 miles from China at this place, but it's still fairly low elevation, so it has a very tropical feel to it. That river is about to go dry, where he has his guiding business, that they're going to turn off the tap of that river and run it through another one of these tunnels. And it's just going to be too bad for his operation there. And who's going to go visit that to see a dry riverbed? So it is really too bad to see the type of development that they're having there. And this is just what we were talking about earlier at the top of the broadcast was there's a lot of talk about sustainable hydropower, but if you look at what's actually on the table or actually being built in many of these places is the worst type of hydropower. And that's the thing that we're really trying to call attention to. So go to savethekarnali.net and sign Megh's petition, and go to undam.org and sign our Rivers for Climate petition, and spend some time on the savethekarnali.net website and just take a look at some of the beautiful shots of that river and the expeditions that they've done down there.
He makes a pretty forceful case, and you back it up with a lot of passion and knowledge as well, Chris. That's pretty good. I think we've probably gathered some adherents over the course of this show. Hopefully people will go to that site and sign up. John, do you want to weigh in on either the Karnali or anything that we talked about this evening? We got a few more minutes here.
Well, I would just like to point out that the series of interviews that you and Chris have arranged as part of this briefing series are just, wonderful, very informative, and highly relevant to the water climate nexus. And I think we're in a position for next year to have conversations with the Water Pavilion folks and see if we can have our own Waterkeeper session as part of the next COP. You've clearly demonstrated there's more than enough waterkeepers out here with very important topics to discuss and information to share with the public and with the UNFCCC attendees.
Well, we will all work toward that goal. I think that's a good poster to have out there, and it sounds like a nice aspiration. So that's really great. We can kind of wind things down. I did want to say that starting tomorrow, because the U.S. and North America and most of South America goes on daylight saving time tomorrow, so we will still be broadcasting live at 3 o'clock. But in the UK, we'll be moving to 8 p.m. instead of 7. So for those of you who want to tune in, 3 o'clock as usual in the US, North America, and 8 p.m. GMT. So once again, thanks everybody for tuning in. If you want to send your comments to us, just do that on the Facebook page, and we'll try to accommodate them. If you have ideas on what we should be covering this week, we'd love to hear them. So thank you. Thanks very much for joining us, and we will see you again tomorrow. Thanks very much, folks.